And now, another exciting episode in the adventures of Outdoor Journal Radio.
Howdy! Thank you for joining us. Well, I haven't had a new one in a long time. I figured I'd add something.
Sounded a little rough.
Because it always gets you all cranked up.
I like it. Hey,
welcome to the program, Outdoor Journal,
like
the podcast. Outdoor Journal Radio, the podcast show.
Come on now.
Thank you, Dean. He is Peter Bowman.
Hi.
I am Angelo Viola. Surrounded by brilliance, by the way. We have Volvo over there.
Brilliance and good looks. Right?
Newman Orion over there. We have sometimes in and out Nick over there. And, of course, our illustrious producer right over there, now. Dean Taylor. Prefaced by a bunch of bullshit. By the way, I don't know whether you noticed, I'm wearing the lovely bunch of bullshit t-shirt. By the way,
it's a bunch of bullshit.
If you don't have yours yet, you are almost in the minority now because these have become the most popular thing on our site.
No way, really?
No, I'm telling you, they are just flying out.
That's awesome.
And originally they were supposed to be just a one-of. I don't know if you remember or not when they were proposed to us by Tim at Campus Crew. It was going to be like a one-of. And it was so overwhelmingly popular that they decided,
I guess people could wear that anywhere because they don't have to care about the Outdoor Journal Radio podcast. They just think that's a bunch of bullshit no matter what.
I have worn this in places that were totally removed from our world, and people just love it.
They love it.
They just love it.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
It applies to everything.
It does. Right? It applies to everything in life.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
Yes,
right.
it is. Jimmy boy.
Life can be that sometimes.
Oh, my God.
Anyways, welcome to the program. What an exciting show, as per usual. I don't think we've had a bad one yet because today is Fish Talk Day.
Give me a hell yeah!
I love Fish Talk Day.
Fish Talk with the Doc, our very own Dr. Stephen Cooke will be joining us here momentarily, talking about a situation that we're all confronted with every year. Sometimes it comes earlier, sometimes it comes later in the year, but there's always a period of time where we say, holy crap, it is hot today. But yet there we are on the water, sweating away, fishing away. We want to know how that affects fish. And so does Stephen, because they're researching that as we speak.
Yeah.
There's interesting information that they're going to share with us today on the program.
I can't wait for that because there's so many questions, and it's living in Canada now. Our weather is ridiculous. Like when you think about it, how crazy it is from winter to summer, and then from day to day in the summer. Like right now, we're in a heat wave. We were in a heat wave 2 days ago. It's tolerable now. Tomorrow's going to be 28 degrees and sun. Next weekend's going to be 30-something degrees.
I think
it's craziness.
Get used to it because I think that's where we're going to sit for a while.
For sure. It's going to get worse. It's probably going to get worse, I would think.
Now, I recall 2 years ago, we had one of the worst summers of all on our shoots because we never had our rain gear and our foul weather layers off all year.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Two seasons ago?
It was nuts.
There were no shorts, no t-shirts, no nothing. So
a cold season, yeah.
Things are
Speaking of, I just saw, just to get off subject, but talk about weather.
No, you don't want to get off subject.
Northwest Territories, our old buddy Ryan Gregory there, he just posted a thing on Instagram. You would not believe the horse flies there right now.
Did we escape them?
We must have escaped them, dude, because it was ridiculous. I'll show you. I'll find it. It was
like, we're talking numbers or just size?
Numbers. Outside his truck window. They're like swarming like bees. It is. Volvo would go absolutely insane, out of his mind. A person couldn't go out in it. I don't know how people would, maybe you'd have 30 of those dragonflies off you because it would be, I'll show you.
What a test for those dragonflies, though.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It would be good. Anyway, sorry. Just I saw that. It was the heat of the summer. That's what that made me think of it. The heat of the summer going on in Northwest Territories. It brings out all the bugs and everything too, right? So
yeah, it's a strange one for sure, to say the least. Anyways, before we get into Mr. Cooke, Dr. Cooke, why'd they call him Mr. Dean?
He's stature. He's got good stature.
I put it behind you though.
I know.
Everyone knows he's a doctor.
I see him. He's right there. A lovely, smiling Dr. Cooke, and I call him Mr.
It's because it's backwards on that screen. That's why you got it. You
well, that could be it too.
That could be it too. I should just do this.
I should just do that.
DR backwards is Mr.
Then I'd see the doctor, Stephen J. Cooke.
Stephen J. Cooke. Wait a second. What was it? Wait. We got to do that. Stephen J. Cooke, Fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and Secretary of the College of the Royal Society of Canada. He's got quite a title, that man.
That would work. Anyways, before we get into any of that, just a little bit of housekeeping on our part. The Fishing Canada store, we just mentioned a few moments ago. Not only do you get a chance to purchase this lovely shirt that I've got on, but all of the big hits are there.
This little guy right here?
Especially these guys.
Little guy?
Little embroidered Fishing Canada. Show other people where your heart is. Right there. You go out in one of those, they know exactly where you live, baby.
Yeah.
Fishing Canada. These are the latest, the greatest, big embroidered patch on
restocked
hoodies.
For the season. Nice.
Restocked for the season because we've been out for a while. Apparently there was two.
Okay.
By the way, out of those three, here, I want you to now take a guess. So we've got a musky, a walleye, and a largemouth bass version of this wonderful design.
Okay.
Out of those three, I want you to give me in order 1, 2, and 3 in terms of popularity
of sales. Well,
right across the country.
I'm going to go because you're making it sound a little different. I'm going to go non-popular. I'm going to go by looks. I'm going to say musky number 1 because it's a cool looking one. It's like the big. I'm going to say musky walleye bass. That's what I'm going to say.
You're close. The only thing you got perfect on was the bass.
Oh, really?
It's
walleye musky?
It's underperforming. I thought bass would be, because I love the bass design. I think that's fantastic. I think it looks great. But anyways, walleye number 1 and musky number 2.
Yeah.
There you go. And more to come. We're working on some trout species.
How about sheephead? I seem to be pretty good at them
We'll
lately.
do a sheephead. We're going to do a carp. We're going to do a lovely carp.
Come on, are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't put that crankbait in front of them, though. That
No,
yoser,
we'll
you got to put a boilie in front of them.
We'll put a boilie.
A corn. Have a couple little yellow dots above it. That'd be perfect.
T-shirts, hats. I mean, you name it. The collection is growing. Now, this is a new collection that you see here. But there's other collections there that are on the site. Wonderful color palettes and T-shirts. Perfect timing for the summer. Not just the black T-shirts, but we have a whole collection of really cool colors. So check it out. It's all happening at fishingcanada.com. Go there, click on the store, or you can be a heathen like these gentlemen around me. They go through the back door, which is what? What is the back door address?
Shop.fishingcanada.com.
Thank you very much.
Come on now.
There you go.
Come on now.
Listener feedback. Mr.
Yes,
Bowman.
from at Episundberg9326 via YouTube. You like those names, don't you? You like those names.
Wow. And that all means, obviously that means something to whoever.
Yeah, they had to pick a name. Yeah. So there's either Sundberg or maybe the last name. There's maybe they use an EpiPen one day of their life or something. I mean, who knows, right? It could be anything. Fun to be part of your podcast. We had a great time as well at the Lumberjack Lodge, and we'll be returning next year.
These are the folks that were in the background behind us.
Well, we're right there. I'm pointing to them.
I covered them up in the writing there.
Yeah.
That's
they're
okay.
right there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
They were great, actually.
Yeah.
We agree cold water pike taste awesome. We typically don't keep them unless we pull them from the ice in the winter. We also realized our limits and avoided jackpot, okay? They were smarter than us. Let's just say that. How's that?
What was that?
They realized their limits and avoided jackpot, where we went into jackpot.
Oh.
They knew they shouldn't go in there. They were smart. We weren't so smart.
Did we ever tell that story?
No.
Yeah, on that podcast.
Did we?
Yeah.
On that podcast.
Portaging into
Don't let Tony hear that. That's all I can say.
Yeah, right.
It was nice talking to you, your friends from Wisconsin. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it. And great meeting you. You guys were awesome back there. You didn't make too much noise, but just enough that we knew they were there. Yep. Right? So.
Podcast Network highlights. This week we are highlighting Diolo. Diaries of a Lodge Owner. Dioala. He hates it. Steven hates that. I don't know why. I love it.
It's fitting. He needs to have a t-shirt.
Episode 51. Boy, he's already.
Wow, he's almost a year in. Woo!
Behind the Rod, it's called. The story behind Steve's decision to build the lodge through exposure on fishing TV shows, the strategy that he had.
He did good on that one.
He did real good on that.
He was the best at that, for sure.
And also on this episode, he recites the cremation of Sam McGee. Now, we've heard him do it live on several occasions because it was part of his deal at the lodge. everybody would grab a guitar. We'd go out by the fire, and then at some point, Steve would stop everybody, and he'd go into this character.
Have a whiskey or two, and then get into character.
It was the best. Well, apparently, not apparently, he does that on this episode 51, called Behind the Rod, on the Diaries of a Lodge Owner. If you haven't listened to that podcast series yet, you are missing out on some incredibly
Stevie's got some good stuff.
entertaining moments for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine when he gets all emphatic with the words too when he's doing that.
He performs it well on the show.
He's a character for sure when he does that, right? And we got to see the one Dean filmed. Dean filmed the one in the Northwest Territories. We have to see that
it's so good.
Because the climax is the best part of it, probably.
Yeah, we'll post that for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, put it up.
Yeah, we have to. Okay.
In the news, if you are visiting fishingcanada.com as we speak, you'll notice that there is a lead story there. New ballast water regulations for Great Lakes.
About time, buddy.
No
it is
kidding. I could never figure it out, right?
Time.
It was public knowledge, and certainly media, both mainstream and outdoors media, covered it like crazy. Every time we'd have an invasive species hit the Great Lakes, every single media outlet would tell you it came from the ballast of another ship.
That's right. That's right.
So I mean, this went on for 40 years, and I kept thinking, why in the hell don't they change the regulations so that they can't discharge ballast that they picked up in the Atlantic Ocean in the Great Lakes?
That's right. So they did
sounds
change
like
that,
simple.
but that was back in 2006.
Exactly.
And it was just dumping that stuff right there. They're doing before they come into fresh water, and that's all they had to do. But how do you regulate that too, right? I mean, do they go in there with these saltwater samplers in there?
Well, they should.
They should. Absolutely, they should, because that is the problem right there, right? So,
well, new ballast water regulations designed to hinder the transport of aquatic invasive species within our Great Lakes will come into effect at the end of 2024, which is this current year.
Yeah.
Will require vessels entering the Great Lakes to transition to modern ballast water systems that cleanse. And this was the way to do it, right? You actually cleanse the organisms in the water before they're released out into the Great Lakes. So you're filtering.
So
now, it's a filtration system.
New system, right? Yeah.
As opposed to just changing ballast from salt to
water,
fresh.
yeah.
Now you have
need
to filter it, kill anything
Boy,
that's
going to cost them some money too, isn't it? But good. They need to.
Look what
obviously.
it's costing. What do you think the cost was of zebra mussels when they were first introduced? The cost to change all of our pickup lines from all discharge and pickup units, whether it was drinking water, whether it was cooling water for the big power plants, they all had to redesign their intake pipes because the zebra mussels annihilated them.
Yep.
And so think of the billions of dollars that was spent there, and of course with gobies and
who knows
else.
what? Well, I'm assuming there's so many invasives that come in through those ships that we don't even hear about. There's probably tons of them. Maybe that aren't affecting like a zebra would or a goby, but it's happening for sure, right? It's inevitable. So
anyways,
good for them.
It's there. Check it out. It's on fishingcanada.com. It's an interesting story because it does go into detail as to what changes are going to have to be made within the system. And like you just said, it's one thing making these new regs, but now we're going to have to police the hell out of them.
Regulate that, right? And the Coast Guard that pulls them over, like how do you pull over that ship right there? Hey, buddy, pull it over. You know what I mean? That's going to be tough. So there's got to be a way. Hopefully they'll figure it out. Yeah,
they'll figure it out. Fan question of the week comes to us from Tim Downs from Illinois.
Yes.
Via email.
Yeah.
If you have a question that you would like to ask us, feel free, by all means, send it to info@fishingcanada.com. Dean will inadvertently get to it at some point, although he proclaims to be very busy these days. He doesn't have time for any of that. But he will go through it.
That's when that's a bunch of bullshit.
Why did he do that? Exactly.
Okay, come on, Dean.
He'll go through them and he will make a decision which go into his 45-gallon drum and which don't. And the ones that go in there stand a chance of being read here on the program. So there
as
you go.
Tim Downs, as Tim's Downs did.
And what did Tim have to say, Peter?
Tim asked the question, would you ever consider doing any shows in the U.S.? Since Tim is from Illinois, then
we've been getting this a lot, actually. The Americans are starting to write in.
Whoa.
Okay, would you ever consider doing any shows in the U.S.? That's the Fishing Canada show, obviously, he's talking about.
So if you go back into the archives, which I think most of our episodes are now up on YouTube. I could be wrong.
There's still some missing.
Still some missing.
Yeah.
In the early years, in fact, here, how's this? The very first episode of the Fishing Canada show was Reno and I hosted that. We were in Florida. On Lake Marion, I believe was the name of the lake.
Okay.
And that was sort of the headquarters for that episode. From there, we went.
So you headquartered Fishing Canada from the U.S.
Why? Wow. You ask why?
I'm going to have to ask the question.
Because
why.
we could at the time.
Because was it wintertime up here?
It was wintertime up here.
Okay.
And we needed, we had the segments shot. There was one segment, a steelhead segment on the Ganaraska River.
Didn't want to do ice fishing? You didn't want to do an ice fishing headquarters?
Nah. You don't remember the first episode, do you?
I remember seeing it.
I was in a hot tub, hosting it from a hot tub.
Yeah, that was,
So my choices, in a hot tub in Florida, or go and sit my sorry ass on an ice field somewhere. It was a pretty easy decision. So, and then from there, I think for the first 5 years of the show, I dare say every season we had at least one episode that was outside of Canada. Most of them were from the U.S. But we did some South American episodes. We did
Amazon
until
River.
We got enough complaints from Canadian viewers because, unfortunately, as the name implies, like we kind of painted ourselves in the corner. We pigeonholed ourselves because it's called the Fishing Canada show. Mm-hmm. Pretty hard to justify being on the Roanoke River in South Carolina doing the Fishing Canada show. So we got enough complaints that we stopped doing it. I think it was in the first 5 years somewhere. It's too bad because there's some great fishing opportunities south of the border.
I'd loved it. We could get together, Roly Poly there, and Roly and Jimmy. I watched the Jimmy Houston show yesterday, and Roland was guest on it again. My God, they are hilarious.
Oh, the
together.
two of them.
They are something else. What a pair of units, man! I was laughing through the whole show.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But anyways, it would be nice to do it, but the fans have spoken. You know what I mean? The fans have said we don't want the U.S. We want Canada. Well, that was before. I don't know what they think now. What if we had a Fishing Canada Travels South episode?
I think it'd have
like
to be like a very special. No, what it should be is the Fishing Canada guys travel south of the border. Just like we joke about. There used to be another Canadian sport fishing show in this country. And
not to mention any names at all.
They would shoot about 75% of their episodes were out of the country. And so after a while, even Pete and I looked at that and said, my God, they need to change the name or something. It should be a Canadian sport fishing.
And that would be perfect. That would be a perfect name for that show.
A Canadian sport fishing, because then you can go anywhere. You're Canadian, and that's what they were. They were Canadians, but they were sport fishing all over the world. So we said it should be not the Canadian sport fishing show. It should be a Canadian sport fishing show.
Yeah.
But anyways, I digress. Sorry, Tal.
I guess they might have made made a lot of shows, so they must have been making money at it or something. Fans didn't mind it, I guess. So I don't know if our fans would like it or not. Maybe that'd be a great little poll question that we put out to the fans on the web.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I'll put that up.
What would you guys like to see? Would you guys and girls like to see Fishing Canada in the U.S., let's say, just as an example or a feeler, or somewhere aside from Canada?
So do an episode outside of the country.
Yeah, see what they say as a web poll. That'd be a. And we'll say where you're from, please, because we want to make sure the Canadians are given that, because the U.S. might, as in Tim here, he might, they want to see us down there. So let's make sure we know the Canadians and get their opinion, and then we'll base it on our Canadian fanship, because that'll be the most time, I think. Anyways, that's cool.
We interrupt this program to bring you the much anticipated bonus code for the latest Fish in Canada giveaways. This week's code is FISHERY. That's FISHERY, all capital letters, FISHERY. Just type that in the bonus code section of the contest and receive 100 free entries towards all our current giveaways. For those who haven't entered yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Head on over to fishingcanada.com while you listen to the rest of this episode. Click contests and sign up for all the latest Fish in Canada giveaways. And now, back to the show. Alrighty, time for a little fish talk with the doc. And
I love this part of the show. So much fun.
Our very own in-house fish doc himself, Dr. Stephen Cooke. Stephen, how are you, bud?
Hey, good to see you guys.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to be seen, actually. At this stage of my life, it's just good to be seen, trust me. The heat of summer is the theme today for you. We've been experiencing some incredibly hot days out on the water as of late.
And it's just the beginning of summer,
it's just
really.
The beginning.
You know what I mean?
But this year's been insane. It's either raining, cold, or steamy hot.
Brutal hot, yeah.
And we need to know what's happening with the fish. What does this do with the fishing and the fish in particular? Any effect at all? Or is it just us?
Yeah. Oh, it means everything. So we use the phrase the master factor when we talk about water temperature in fish. Because remember, whatever the water temperature is, that's the body temperature of fish or of turtles or of crayfish, all of those so-called ectotherms, where or what we used to call them cold-blooded animals, but really it's their body temperature is the temperature around them, and for animals that live in water, that is the water temperature. So if it's winter and it's 4 degrees under the ice, then their body temperature is about 4 degrees, and if it's 28 degrees Celsius, their body temperature is 28, and everything in their body is dictated by temperature. So they're boring things like their cellular processes and enzymes, basically the machinery of what's going on in the body, but that dictates how much oxygen they need, how fast they can swim, how quickly they digest food, and therefore how quickly they need more food to keep things going. So the costs of making a living increase exponentially with warmer water temperatures. So it's not just like, I need, it's getting a little bit worse. It tends to get a lot worse quickly. And there are thresholds. There's temperatures where it gets over the limit and a fish will die. Those temperatures can be, you can imagine a fish just sitting doing nothing. Those temperatures, of course, are higher than if you say, oh, I'm a salmon and I actually have to not just sit there, but I have to migrate. So those temperatures are a little lower than what the lethal temperatures would be because they have to exercise on top of it. And when you're on death's doorstep, there's no room, there's no scope for that exercise.
Wow.
I got a million questions. I'm sure Pete does too. So number one, we keep saying that fish is there sunning itself and it's going into shallow water to warm up and et cetera. But basically what you're saying, that probably is not the case because most of them are not really, really comfortable in warm water from what I'm hearing. And if that's the case, then how come the fish just don't? I mean, if it's that simple, so if fish are normally in, let's just call it 6 feet of water, if they're in a 6 foot area and because the heat, the sun's been blasting down in that patch of water for so long that it's gone to that discomfort zone, then wouldn't it just be a natural move for them just to slide down a little deeper in the water column because they've got to know that the water drops in temperature as they get deeper? Or am I wrong in that assumption too?
Yep, they do know that. Yes. Yeah. So this is science, so we'll say it's complicated. So obviously early in the season, things like sunfish, including the bass, they love that sun. They're trying to get that extra warmth so that their body can sort of start going. They can start cranking. They can start digesting food quickly, quicker than they would during winter. So
they want heat at that point.
At that point, it's just at some point it becomes too much. And so, the obvious question, why not just move, right? If when we're uncomfortable, we pick up and move, or maybe we adjust the air conditioning, but they don't have that that opportunity. So there are a couple of things. So first of all, fish are really good at being able, they're basically a living thermometer, and they can detect differences in temperature down to 0.001 degrees Celsius. And so what that means is they're able to, imagine a bass under the lily pads. It can move around trying to find a spring, obviously shade under the lily pads, maybe a slightly deeper patch that maybe there's an incoming creek that might be half a degree, 2-3 degrees colder than the area around it. So first off, they're pretty good at finding those micro habitats, those cool water refugia. Although in that kind of scenario, like a backwater largemouth swamp, there's not much. Right. But there's a couple other things that come into play. So one is food, right? Even if it's uncomfortable. So if you're hungry and I dangle, something, a bag of chips, you're going to walk into an area that's either really cold or really hot or a blizzard if you're that hungry. And fish will do the same. If they know that there's food up there, they'll go. And even though it might be too warm for the bass, it might not be too warm for the golden shiners or for the blunt-nosed minnow and so on. So the other thing is fear. Fish are afraid. They're afraid of being eaten. Even big fish that we like to catch. And so sometimes that idea of, can't they just slip into deeper water? If there's less structure, less cover, that makes them more vulnerable to predation. So it's this trade-off. They're sort of balancing, it's hot, but it's
better than over there where I see that gator looking at me. Yeah,
there's something to eat, and I haven't seen an osprey fly overhead, or it hasn't seen me because I'm under the lily pads. I go over there. There's muskie that hang out at that weed bed, and the last time I saw, I haven't eaten a good golden shiner over there in weeks. So all of those are things that the fish are trading off. Again, at some point there's a threshold and it doesn't matter. Hot water will kill fish. But even when they're in that danger zone, those are the kinds of things they're trading off.
Wow. Interesting. So you said that the bass, let's go the opposite end of the spectrum now. You said bass and sunfish go into the shallows because they want the sun in the spring. What about a fish like a lake trout? Does it need the sun or anything? Because when lake trout, when the ice goes away, the water is going to start getting a bit warmer and all that. What's the lake trout do just to get going and feeding? Because they eat all winter too, right? So is there a big difference there?
They are, because they are, fancy term, cold water stenotherms. So they stay at pretty similar temperatures year round, obviously, or they try and stay within as narrow of a temperature range as possible. And that temperature range is on the cool side. It doesn't mean that they won't come up into shallower water and feed, but they'll go back down to where they came from. And they'll try and do that before their body temperature changes. So, so we see these short-term sort of foraging forays into warmer water, and then right back to the cool. So so they take advantage of that warm water if there's food up there, but they're different, and there's a reason sunfish are called sunfish.
Right. I'm assuming. Sorry, Ange. I'm assuming Chinook salmon would be the same thing in Lake Ontario. You see them go up. They're in this coldest, deepest water, whatever, and they seem to go up and hit these bait balls up shallow. But I'm assuming they jump back down or swim back down. Obviously. Okay. Yep.
How long does it take a fish to make that adjustment? Like how long is too long to be in hot water, for example?
Yeah, it really depends on water temperature and body size. So bigger fish take longer for their body temperature to change. Something that's tiny has more relative surface area to volume, and so it will change quite quickly. So the bigger fish can go into those really, really hot water environments, forage for 10, 15 minute and go back into cool water without it being lethal. Whereas something like a little larval stage fish, it might be on the order of seconds to minutes before its body temperature has changed and it's responding negatively or just not responsive at all. That's sort of what happens when it gets too hot, they become, just like on a lazy hot summer day, you're not going to climb a mountain. You're going to chill beside a pool or beside the lake. You're going to sit back and be an outdoor couch potato. And they do the same. The hotter it is, the quieter it gets. But that means as anglers they still need to eat, right? Fish, especially at those temperatures. So you need to think about when they are eating. And not surprisingly, it's going to be early in the morning, late in the evening, or opportunistically when you put it right in front of them and they don't have to chase it, it's just there. So it's an easy meal. They haven't had to swim far to get it.
So in extremely hot water, and talking about, let's talk largemouth bass in particular. So in extremely hot water, safer to say, and in terms of presentations for those fish, safer to say that a very precise vertical presentation where you're dropping a jig on top of a fish's head literally is going to be the only way that fish is going to get caught that day, because it's not going to chase that spinnerbait across the back 40.
Theoretically, yes, although fish don't read the rules, and you will still get those reaction strikes, right? If you put, something like a chatterbait through the right spot, and all they have to do is, swim 2 feet to the left, they'll do it. So you can, strategy one is just cover a crap load of water and hope you're going to get lucky. But we also know that they really hunker down. And so the concentrations of fish are, down sort of at the base of those dark, the dark shadowy weeds, way in good, deep lilies and things like that. So I prefer to go and be more tactical, figure out where I think they are, and then do that more precise fishing as you described.
It also probably matters if and when that largemouth has fed. If he fed 3 days ago, and that day he feeds, he's not going to chase anything probably when he's got a bluegill in him. But 3 days from now, when he's hungry as hell, he might burst out there for that little 2 foot, 3 foot, 5 foot span or whatever it is, right?
Isn't it funny, though? I'm just thinking about that now. The very same places that we're talking about where these fish will take refuge and hunker down, as we call it. The same place they'll do during really hot, mile-high skies, extremely hot water conditions. Same place that they'll go when it's a cold front or very cold conditions. The opposite. They'll look for those places that are kind of tucked in away from, I guess, danger. And they can just wait it out. So kind of the same. So wherever you're kind of fishing, and we're talking largemouth in particular, wherever you fish them during those wonderful, brilliant summer days, probably the same place you should look for them during a severe cold front. Same idea. Whether it's reeds, underdocks, piece of wood, floating slop. I mean, any of those places.
For a largemouth, for sure, right? Walleye might be different, but I don't know.
Well, let's talk about walleye then. I mean, these are two extremely different species. Are they prone to the same weaknesses, we'll call them, as largemouth in terms of temperature?
Yeah, so largemouth, not surprisingly, they hang out in shallow, sloppy areas that get really warm. That's consistent with them being fish that can handle those temperatures better than, say, a smallmouth, which likes deeper, cooler waters. And then walleye are sort of in that smallmouth, maybe even tending a little bit more cooler. And they tend to respond with depth. That tends to be the default response of walleye is, I will go deeper. And then they find their cool temperatures. It can be more difficult to locate them as an angler if you don't have good electronics. But it also brings in barotrauma issues. So that's the other equation. So the fish are at cool temperatures. You bring them up to shallows, and all of a sudden they're dealing with warm temperatures plus barotrauma. So if you're going to release those fish, it's get them back in the water quickly so that they can get back to depth. If they're struggling near the surface, they're getting cooked. That's water that they are not going to be comfortable with in the summer.
That's a great point. People need to keep that in consideration. They should keep that in consideration on deep water fishing no matter when you do it. But then when you add that warm water or hot water element to it, that makes it even more volatile, right?
Is there a magic number for walleye? Who is that? Who is that you're introducing to us there?
We'll talk about the owl here in a minute. Okay. So,
don't walk into a bar with that on your shoulder, buddy. Somebody's going to knock that off. I'm going to guarantee you.
So is there a magic temperature for walleye? Things start to go quite poorly, probably at the 22, 23 degrees Celsius mark, which is, I think that's about 74-ish or so, 75 Fahrenheit. So.
Okay.
And let's not get confused with surface temperature either,
I was going to mention
water
that.
temperature, right?
It's huge difference.
We do it all the time. We go into a back bay and we look. What's the temperature? 58.5. Oh, okay, that's too cold, too hot.
Yeah.
But
it's our indicator for fishing, but it ain't the reality of the fish's life. That's for sure, right?
How deep is that? How surface temp? How far down will it affect fish?
Just go swimming. You'll feel your feet. Take a dive down to 10 feet. You're like, wow, I can't believe how much difference there is there. So,
exactly. And it depends, of course, on the water. But it depends. But when you dive off a dock or dive off your boat when you're out fishing just to cool off, you'll feel it. And it's usually 5, 6, 7 feet down is where you start to really feel that the start of that.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Stephen, I'm going to go off. Not off topic, but
I want to get this owl off my shoulder.
Okay, do the owl first, then go back to
why do I have an owl on my shoulder?
Steven,
what does this have to do with the topic of today?
Right.
Because largemouth eat owls?
Nope.
Muskies?
Okay. Opportunistically, maybe. So, have you heard of hoot owl restrictions?
What the hell are you talking about?
So if we were in Montana or Alberta, hoot owl restrictions are something you would be familiar with because you would need to abide by them to get any fishing opportunity for stream and river salmonids. So the concept is that basically fisheries are closed during the hottest parts of the day and open during the coolest parts of the day. And so the hottest parts of the day usually go from about 2 p.m. through till about midnight. And then from midnight till about 2 p.m, it's comparatively cooler. And the reason they call them hoot owl restrictions, it came from loggers who would, so that they didn't overheat when they were doing their logging work, they would work those same hours. And when they were working, at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, they would hear a ton of owls. So they call them hoot owl restrictions. And I bring them up because they're becoming more and more common, not just out west, but this year on the Restigouche and the Miramichi, we're seeing them as well. So it used to be on really sensitive water bodies, when the water got too hot, usually for a salmonid of some sort, they would just close it altogether.
Right.
And they've been more flexible now. So whenever water temperatures exceed, it's usually 20 degrees Celsius, 68 Fahrenheit for 2 or 3 days, then the hoot owl restrictions will trigger, and it'll go into that idea of, you can either only fish from midnight till 2 or from, 6 a.m. till noon, or whatever time periods a given jurisdiction has selected. And so these are in effect now out east. There's articles in mainstream media about fisheries closures, and Alberta now has them for the southern waters, including the Bow River. They've got them in effect, but it's from July 1st to October 31st in Alberta, but that's when you have to figure out whether they're in effect on a given day. So if they're off, then you can go fish at 6 p.m. But if they're on, you have that limited fishing window.
How do you know that? How can you tell? Exactly. I mean, in the regs is one thing, but how do you know that day by day?
We're not used to this in Ontario, but in British Columbia, I used to live in BC. You have to phone to figure out whether a fishery is open or closed on a given day. Things are much more dynamic. And that, as well as checking websites, is the approach that Alberta's gone with. So
I hope it's not like the passport office. I was on the phone for 2 hours in the boat the other day. 2 friggin' hours to find out my passport was in the mail. Okay, sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
Should be. It's theoretically better than that.
Okay,
it's just a recording that says, on X date, Hoot Owl closures are in effect, for the next 3 days or whatever it is. So,
that's the way to do it.
Yeah. So
cool.
Unfortunately, that's the world we're in right now, where water temps are getting to the point where it's starting to limit fishing opportunities. And again, we're seeing it tends to be the coasts more than our interior waters here, but it doesn't mean we don't have those hot days where, the few brook trout streams that are left in southwestern Ontario aren't just, cooking and a fish can maybe make it just sitting there doing nothing, but the exercise of fishing on top of that can push them over the edge.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about next was, with the ever-growing popularity of catch and release fishing, obviously the temperatures play a much bigger role than ever before. Are there species of fish that just don't do well under hot weather conditions as opposed to fish who do when it comes to catch and release?
Yeah, it's going to be the fish that are cold water are the ones that tend to do the most poorly. So that's going to be our salmonids here in Ontario. So our native salmonids like brook trout, lake trout, as well as our introduced ones like rainbows and and browns and the various Pacific salmon, Chinook, coho, and so on that we can fish for in the Great Lakes themselves. So, but it all depends. We talked already about when there's depth.
Right, they're good.
They're not dealing. A Chinook salmon in Lake Ontario is not dealing with a warm spell because they're at depth. Only if they come up into shallow water. They come up in shallow water to feed occasionally, as we've discussed, but they'll go back down, or when we pull them up. And so that comes to in those hot temperatures, if you're going to fish, you catch a salmonid and it's legal to do so, maybe you want to eat it, or alternatively, get it back in the water as quickly as possible. Holding a fish that's been caught at depth in cold water, it came from cold water, holding it in, say, a keep box or a live well, a cooler filled with water for a couple minutes, thinking you're helping it at if it's surface water temperature, you're not.
That's a great point. I wouldn't even think it. People wouldn't even think of that. I wouldn't think of that, really. So that's a great point. You're thinking you're giving them a big burst of oxygen. Oh, this fish is going to be healthy as hell, but you're heating them up. You're cooking them. Yeah. Wow.
I got a few more props.
Oh my God.
I like to take when I go fishing in the summer. So the first is a simple thermometer. What's fantastic now is tackle shops carry these. Right. You used to have to go to a snooty fly shop to find. I
hear that, Dean. That's awesome. Go ahead. Sorry.
But now you can pick these up at any fishing store, and then you're able to do your own sort of monitoring. How warm is the temperature? How much did it change between when I started at 6 a.m. this morning and at noon and at 4 in the afternoon? You can check your live well temperature if you're holding fish in a live well. And then the other is whether it be pliers or hemostats if you're working with smaller fish, but something to help get that fish off quickly so that if you are going to release it, you can get it back in the water and let it get back to those cool temperatures where they've at depth where they've come from.
Hey, go back a step now. Those are good points, by the way, but let's say we're fishing salmonids. We're fishing Chinook, or we got a coho or a Chinook in Lake Ontario. It's not doing great. If you added ice to your live well, would that help and try to bring the fish back? Let's say you want to release it, but it's not doing great. So if I throw it back, it might not. But if you cool that water down in your live well with nice ice, would that help?
Yeah. as long as you think about or guesstimate the temperature from where it came from, because you can also cold shock the fish. Too cold will stun them as well, and they'll literally just sit there sort of oblivious. You'll let them go, and they'll be dealing with the stress of cold shock. So the idea is, and this is the same for a bass tournament, you're not trying to maintain surface water. You're trying, in an ideal world, you'd take your thermometer and lower it down 10 feet if you were fishing smallies in 10 feet, see what the temperature is, and that's your target. So we usually say no more than 5 or 6 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than what surface temperature is. So that's a good safe zone. You're unlikely to cold shock them. So just knocking it down a couple degrees Celsius, 4, 5, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, making sure you're using ice that is not hyperchlorinated. And
we've all learned from that one, I think, through the years.
And also realizing that, especially if we're talking, if even with a big cooler and a big salmonid, they're going to hoover through that oxygen very, very quickly. It's remarkable how much oxygen they need, even if you cool the water. So you always have to be thinking about that as well. It's not just temperature, it's oxygen. And after they've exercised, that's when they're taking it all in. And so get your pictures and if the fish is lively, get it back as soon as possible. The fish always tell you when they're ready to go. That's been my experience. There's no, there's science behind that, but you don't need any degrees or formal training. If you can't hold on to that fish, if it's vigorous, upright, and trying to get away from you, don't hold it back. Let it go.
Right. You just mentioned something, and this might be the dumbest question I've ever asked a biologist especially, but you said the fish exercise. So a fish through swimming, through a lot of exertion, does their body temperature stay the exact same through that whole thing, or can their body temperature regulate and go up? Can they get hot when they're swimming? You know what I mean? Or like we get sick as humans, our temperature goes up in our body. Is that possible in a fish?
Fish body temperature will increase by fractions of a degree in response to exercise or even digestion, but not something I'd be able to ever measure with a simple thermometer. It would have to be in the lab. The fish would have to be all instrumented up. So it's negligible. Their body temperature really is whatever the water is around them, assuming they've been in that water long enough to equilibrate with that water temperature.
How about, I knew it was a dumb question. Northern Pike, Steve? What's the deal with them? They're a little different. They're it's funny because sometimes they're surprisingly strong fish, and other times they're surprisingly wimpy fish. And I think it's probably all based on what the fish went through prior to being caught, I suppose. But what's the deal with them in terms of...
And let's include muskie in that too, because muskie to me are even
wimpier,
worse than pike.
Even wimpier,
like the apex predator in two of them, and they're wimpy. So go ahead.
What's the word with those?
Yeah, we're going to start with pike because they are a bit different. So pike are fish that you can find in Allure Gorge in the cold water brown trout fishery section of the Grand River. So they actually tend to prefer cooler temperatures, and on hot days when surface temps are up, it's really challenging to catch pike. You need to again move off into those deeper weed beds and so on to find them. So pike are definitely temperature sensitive. We've done a bunch of work on pike where we injure them in various ways and do things to them to simulate good handling and bad handling. And when temperatures are moderate to cool, you can basically do anything to a pike. They're pretty darn bulletproof, including pretty severe gill damage, which normally for most any other species, a fish would be dead. I've caught repeatedly fish that have been missing gill arches that we accidentally damaged, and you're like, that fish is a goner, and you catch it 2 days later. So they're pretty remarkable, pike are. But where they don't do well is warm temperatures, and it's oftentimes from the handling and the infections that develop from there, from fungus. So they seem to be quite sensitive to abrasion from nets. If you bounce them around and on gravel at the side of the lake, or bounce on carpet, it in the bottom of a boat. Those are the things. And the fish will swim away. The fish will apparently look good to you, but 3 or 4 or 5 days later, it'll develop a fur coat from water mold. So that seems to be the mechanism by which temperature wipes out pike.
And muskie?
Yeah. Muskie, so back, I guess it was about 15 years ago, we actually did a catch and release study funded by our friends at Muskies Canada. We caught a pile of muskie in the Rideau and the Ottawa River, working with characters that you would know, a bunch of fishing guides. And at the end of the day, we found very little difference between what we called gentle handling, where we basically used best practices. We didn't bring the fish on the boat, released them at the side of the boat, no air exposure, that kind of thing, versus something that not egregious, but what an angler might do. Bring them onto the boat, get a few pictures, there's some air exposure, and get them back. So we sort of compared those, and we saw negligible mortality across the board. The fish were, temperature didn't seem to have much of an effect. But those were benign temperature years. And we caught fish during benign temperatures, the 2 years that we did that work. So Muskies Canada came back to us and said, what about warm temperatures? And so we've got crews on the water today flogging muskie in areas. We're going to shallow waters that are intentionally warm, and we are catching muskie. We are putting tags on them and tracking them for about a week to see how well those fish do. We're doing, again, sort of a gradient of treatment from gentle to a bit more severe to see where those thresholds are. Again, those numbers we generated at the cooler temperatures, it's nice to know you can catch and handle a muskie without being a musky expert, and the fish is probably going to do pretty well at those cooler temperatures. But it's at those high temps where we're really trying to figure out what are those thresholds. So I can't tell you what they are right now, but they most certainly exist, especially for fish that fight as intense and aggressive way as they do.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's interesting.
We kind of think of those two species as being, like Stephen just said, tough, aggressive.
Tough guy. Yeah.
But now think about it. If you take the size and the weight and applied that to the other fish that we talked about earlier, smallmouth, largemouth, bass, and walleye, they'd probably be as tough and aggressive and mean and hard to deal with as the others, right? So we always say that muskie are tough but that's because they're big. Generally, they're much larger than the other fish that we're catching. So we just automatically associate them with having to be tougher. Yeah. But in this case, we know they're not. They're as you said, muskie are probably the biggest
of them all for
wimps.
us. Yeah. When they what Stephen said, they exert themselves so fast, so hard, I think, right? And then they come into our environment.
Something else that we have been encountering, certainly this year and last year, getting back to pike for just a moment, is that I didn't realize before just how much damage they do to themselves, with our help, when they roll up in your line, because they tend to do that. Pike are almost like alligators and crocodiles, right? They for whatever reason, they tend to roll up in your leader in your line, and never really noticed before until recently just how much damage that causes to the fish. Maybe you can address that for just a moment.
Yeah, and that's something that's hard to study. We can simulate that, but we have used cameras that you control behind the boat, and the lure comes after, so you can see pike, and you can see pike follow your lure for hours until you change the boat speed or give the rod a little tap, and then all of a sudden they either bail or strike. And they'll come back and strike repeatedly, which is so cool. All right, I'm getting excited here. But you do see them roll, and there's not many fish around here that really do that, as you say. And some of those, it can definitely cut them quite deeply. Braid certainly does a number on them, but so does monofilament. And they roll so quickly. It doesn't matter how fast you are on the reel. It doesn't matter if you're using a 8-gear ratio bait caster and are just cranking it. They'll rush and roll, and there's nothing you can do. That's
what I was going to ask you.
That's on them, unfortunately.
We look at them, we say, "Wow, look at that!"
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of damage.
Is that little thin line versus a big, like a swipe on the carpet of the boat? Is one more dangerous than the other? Are they equal? That little wee thin line there, is it still going to get bacteria in it and infected in it?
It will. Bacteria and fungus opportunistically, again, depends on how deep, how that line came off them. Oftentimes the line will kind of almost like sort of shear down their body.
Right.
So it's not
going against the scales and stuff, and popping the scales, right?
Yeah. So certainly not the best things for them, but again, getting them back in the water, minimizing additional handling can be helpful.
A few years, right? About 20 years ago.
That's a few to us now, isn't it? That's a few years for us.
It was in vogue for about, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. And it was a blue color, but it was a product that you put into your live well that was done so to help exactly that problem, to kill bacteria.
What was the name of that? What was that? Fish formula? No. It was a scent.
Yeah,
but it was something.
They're still using it. TH Marine still sells one to this day. Yep.
What do you think of that? Or would that help in the case of a pike, for example?
So those products, and I need to be careful, they make a lot of claims, but they are an unregulated industry. So they can kind of claim what they want. It's unclear how much science is behind them or what's actually in the products. And the testing we've done, and I'm not going to say which specific products, but we tested 3 of them in the context of bass, largemouth bass, recovery and live wells, and we saw no benefit. So, they weren't worse than just normal.
That must be good.
No. But there is a caution, and that is that Health Canada regulates what we eat, what, ensures our safety, and putting products in fish. So if you hold a fish in a live well and it's in some product like that and you release it, you are now releasing a fish that has whatever that product is within it. Right. They all, of course, claim that they're, either biodegradable or made with natural products and so on, but we still don't know what's in them. And so I wouldn't want to eat a fish that's come out of a live well that's, been in some unknown. So technically, not that Health Canada inspectors are going to be wandering the lakes looking for that, but we don't want to put things into the food chain. So some anglers love it, others don't. I'm more of a get them back to where they came from as quickly as possible and keep them wet.
Is it bad for the fish in a live well? 2 hours sitting in a tournament, 3 hours in a tournament. Adding this stuff in, they say it calms them down, relaxes them, it does all that stuff. But ultimately, is it worse for the fish to have that in there than not have that in there?
Yeah, we found it to be pretty neutral. No benefit, no negative consequence other than, again, you're burdening them. Of course, we don't know how, about quality controls. Is the product the same this week as it was, the bottle you bought 2 months ago. So there's just some questions because it is an unregulated, it's not from a food and drug company that's monitored by the US FDA or Health Canada. So again, it could be anything. So that's the challenge.
I remember when you mentioned that it was green, right? It was green in color.
No, it was blue. Was it? I thought it was blue.
One we used to use was green. Mike Burris and I used to put it in the cap, and you pour it in.
Yeah.
So we were doing a bass tournament one time, and we said, we got to try this shit. This has got to work. This is supposed to be great for the fish. And we forgot to turn the live well recirculator back on or something like that. All those fish were laying sideways within minutes. They were but they were still alive, right? They were dormant, they were doing what they said, calming them down. They were sleeping, it looked like they were sleeping on their sides. And then we said, holy shit. So we put the live well constant on like that, and they came back. They literally did come back, but it almost knocked them out.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the other memory I had, that was one, because often we'd overdo it, and they would do exactly what
Jungle
Pete said.
Juice? Was it called Jungle Juice? That was
Jungle Juice.
That's the old name. That was the old brand.
Anyways, So there was that, and we were guilty of that a few times. But the other one, when you were talking about the cold shock, we used to be big on ice. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't really even think about the chlorine that we were adding to the water, by the way. It was just ice. We knew that ice was good. Like bags, as many as you could fit into a cooler with those fish, the better it was, to the point where most of the time they would tilt on their side or fully upside down. And we'd say, good, it's working because we've stunned them. So that's good because the cold has put them to sleep.
Stunned them.
But that was our thinking back then, right? Nobody knew anything. We were all, experimenting every time out, every weekend out. We'd be experimenting with these fish and trying to figure out.
What about those little freezer packs, those blue freezer packs?
Yeah.
Would that like take one smaller one like that, just add one in there just to bring it down a little bit? Would that be better than chlorinated? Obviously better than chlorinated water, but would they work?
Or you can take a 2-liter pop bottle and fill it with lake water and freeze that. You can freeze blocks of lake water. You do want to make sure that you don't turn it into, where they have to spend all their time dodging these big projectiors that are heating them up. So, you can strap it to something within, you just don't want them to be abused by that.
What about those livewell bags, the individual fish bags that you put in a livewell? They're all mesh. You put it in one. Are they a good idea? This is all coming organically here.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of work on those, and also looking at different ways of marking individual fish for culling. We did not hold the fish long-term to assess, but my concern with the sort of zippered pouch approach is that that's a lot of abrasion on those fish. It's kind of like putting them in it's a nice net, but keeping them for a long time, which is going to slowly abrade and, remove slime. So I'm not a super big fan of. I imagine that would lead to latent fungal infections.
Okay. Okay.
There's so many things that I think we will in 10 years from now, if we can have this conversation again.
Because 10 years ago, we have a lot of answers from 10 years ago now, right?
What I don't understand, because clearly temperature plays a major role in our ability to successfully interact with fish and do our thing, have our fun, and still be able to release them and sustain and manage the populations of fish. Through all of this in the last 40 years, I am surprised that somebody has not manufactured a way of doing exactly that, regulating the temperature in a live well. Call it refrigeration, whatever that technology is. I'm surprised that these boats that are now selling for $150,000 to $200,000 a copy have not come up with the ultimate solution. Hey, we've got an actual thermostat on the live well of these babies. You can set that thermostat at whatever you want.
Yeah, they have oxygenators and stuff like that.
Oxygenators, but no temperature control, which I think would be the most important and valuable commodity you could have on one of these boats.
I totally agree. Yeah. I think the one thing to remember with all of this, and I think the jungle juice example was one where a little bit's good, a lot must be even better. Yeah. And
that was our
idea on that. Ice so we've got ice, we've got all additives that we can put in, or added oxygen, and all of those things in excess would be worse for fish. So if you're going to change temperature, cool it a little bit. If you're going to add oxygen, just enough, not a rolling boil, because too much oxygen kills fish. And if you're going to use products, as long as it's legal to do so, follow the instructions that the manufacturers have.
There is a solution to all of those problems. You know that, right? And it might be something that's forced on us if we don't look into it ourselves, and that is, don't put fish in the live well. That is that if you're fishing a tournament, and if tournaments they're a very important thing to have, because that's how the industry grows, and that's how we introduce younger generations to our sport. But it's got to be a catch, quick way, get out, put them back
Yeah, that
get on
MLF
with
style.
life.
The way
MLF style.
right
You know,
there.
it's
we
truly the best way.
An email this week. I just answered an email yesterday. A guy that lives, I think, it was in the Rideau system, and he says there's people that have been catching our largemouth for years, and they take them down to Smith Falls or whatever like that. They release
Rideau
them all.
Ferry.
Yeah,
Rideau
and they
Ferry.
say they release them all in that area, and the fishing has changed completely because of that, right? So there is effects. I mean, it has to be, right? A fish like a largemouth, he's not going to travel 20 miles to get back home.
Especially if it's better where you just drop them off.
Thank you very much.
You kidding me?
Yeah, you're kidding. Yeah, I'm kidding. So,
but no, the answer is simple. We know it, and it's going to be if it's not done voluntarily. I think at some point it might be forced upon us. That's
you never know.
Just the way. Forget live wells. Why do you need a live well if you're going to keep fish for consumption? Well, do them in. And put them in a box. You don't need a.
My last outing, I could have called it a dead well because I didn't even put water in.
No,
And I bumped him in the head and bled him, and I put him in the box, and I didn't even put water in. He says he's not gonna. I'm taking him home anyways, no matter what, right?
Exactly.
So
if we eliminate stocking of fish during competitive tournament situations, we don't even need live wells anymore, honestly, because they seem to be the center of most of the problems that we're talking about. As you even mentioned yourself, Stephen, the best thing to do when you catch fish is, handle it as little as possible. Get your picture, your hero shot, because that seems to be, God forbid, that seems to be the thing. Get it, but release it right away. And then you have no issues, right?
It certainly removes a number of opportunities for things to go badly.
Right.
So it removes a live well mistake, intentional or unintentional. Right. I thought more would be better, but it's not. Or alternatively, the batteries went out, or I wasn't paying attention. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you've got the live well, the displacement. So it certainly addresses some of the issues, and we're starting to see some of the college level bass fishing clubs go this direction. And so I actually think it'll be generational when it happens. It sort of happened quickly, and all sorts of, organizations adopted it and then sort of pushed it to the side again. There's, of course, a marketing aspect to this. There's a technology aspect to it, but all the technology is going to continue to evolve where, you won't need a multi-billion-dollar media empire to have functionally a live streamed, multiple boats feeding into something where the viewing public and friends and family can participate sort of remotely and cheer people on. And so, but it'll happen in due course. Or, we've also seen hybrids where you keep your biggest fish.
That's another good one I like. Yeah.
So you still have a weigh in, or you only, which are the top 10 boats where things are looking good, and, and they'll weigh in, a couple of fish, but everybody else, if you're in last place and you've got an 11-ounce largemouth, is weighing in super beneficial?
That's a great point. Great point.
I mean, you need 3 boats to weigh in on the last day for sure.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's irrelevant. And you know what? How you stop any more people, saying, "Oh no, but I could have." Well, no, you only have value in the top 3 spots. In other words, anything beyond third, no. You had a great day. You had a wonderful outing. The weekend, the weather was good. Camaraderie, everything was great.
You caught an 11-ounce bass.
Whatever you caught. And you had a good time. Go home, chalk it up to experience, come back next time and have at it.
Yeah.
The top 3 from the day before, they've got something to weigh in. But man, that would eliminate a lot of problems right there.
It would. It really would.
It also addresses the congestion issue to some extent. So instead of having a single launch and a single weigh site, and there's been on Big Rideau, which is a water body around here where on occasion there's some conflict. Some of the tournaments have attempted that, where they have, there'll be a marshal to check in with at 3 locations, but it spreads out the boats. It makes parking easier. Boats aren't having to zoom and race to get to one location at one specific time.
Wow,
so
I like that.
So there's some safety, crowding, sort of, keeping other water users happy benefits that can come from that too.
I never heard of that one. That's not a bad. At least they're progressing that way.
Once again, I regress to the old days. But
oh boy, here we go.
We tried Shimano, who were at the time, they really wanted to help in this live release situation that we were badly managing back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s for that matter. Anyways, they came along with their Shimano live release boats, and they had a really wonderful idea about the displacement issue, because we were fishing on lakes where cottagers were complaining about their fish being taken away and never to be seen again,
going
right?
Through a lock system.
Exactly.
You drive through the locks to get there.
So they came up with a way that they would ask the anglers where they caught their fish. Once the weigh-in was done, they would keep those 5 fish or 6, whatever it was back then, I don't recall. They would keep them isolated, and each angler would, when they came off, they would tell somebody behind the scenes where they caught those fish. The idea there was that those fish then would go on a boat that was going to release fish in that area or that other lake. I think it was even, in this case, was an other lake.
Probably, yeah.
So, at the time, I think, well, that's a wonderful idea. And then we started hearing rumors that guys were lying. Guys were lying about where they caught the fish, because they didn't trust the scrutineer or whoever was bagging those fish. They didn't trust them not to tell their buddy where they had caught the fish. So if they caught them on, Balsam Lake, they said, yeah, no, they're all from Canal. They went to. So it became a bigger issue because fish were inadvertently being displaced on purpose. So it was a mess. You can't trust anglers, is all I got to say.
Hey, Stephen, in closing, Dean wrote a question down here, and I'm going to read it out here. Does Dr. Cooke think temperature-related closures are necessary for certain species?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some species that are simply so sensitive that is the case. And again, our salmonids, when we talk about, bull trout, which are doing so very poorly in many parts of Alberta, our Atlantic salmon on the west, on the east coast and so on. I think what we need to do as anglers is be cognizant and change our behavior as needed. So on those warm days, get those fish back in the water quickly. If the surface temperature is brutal, get up earlier the next day and hit the water then. We don't want to be regulated, right? Nobody wants more regulations.
Right.
So if we can embrace good behavior, be stewards of our waters, then we sort of save ourselves from ourselves. We save the fish and we save that fishing opportunity. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years, really trying to push the importance of good behavior. And, M&R wants, our various natural resource management agencies want that too. They don't want to have to put more regulations on. If we can educate and nudge and have these sort of social movements towards better fish care and, that saves them time and effort. They can focus on the big issues, the mega poachers, and not have to worry about whether or not, we're holding the fish in the water too long. So,
I think it'd be a nightmare. It'd be a nightmare too. We already have a lack of conservation officers to begin with. It's a joke, right? So how are we going to police that? Unless of course we're our own stewards. Unless the Whitby Harbor boys see somebody going out in the middle of the day. Hey, buddy, by the way, it's illegal to go out. But it'd be so hard to regulate. You know what I mean? So, interesting.
Yeah. Hopefully and you see it already in, even though we don't necessarily have the data, the folks that fish muskie, the guides that fish muskie on the Ottawa River, make tactical decisions based on what they think is best for the fish. They're looking at water temps on a day-to-day basis. Right. They're deciding what part of the day they're going to fish. And when it's so hot that it's not good for fish, and the fishing ain't so good either. So and it's not necessarily pleasant to be out there.
That's what I was going to say. It's not so good. It's not so good for you either, right? Right. That's probably the best way to measure it. If it's uncomfortable for you that you say, "My God, this is too hot for me," chances are you shouldn't be out there fishing because it's even worse for the fish. Yeah. Right. It's a good way to measure it. So,
hey, one request next week or next time we do this, can we choose a topic where I don't have to bring a stuffy?
oh boy. I thought you rather look good with him on your shoulder, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was good.
Dr. Awesome. Cooke, thank you very much for joining us once again. We've taken more time than we should, but we don't do it often enough, so that's why all of these questions are piling up. But we really appreciate it. The audience really appreciates it, and have yourself a wonderful summer. We don't talk to you sooner.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
All right, Stephen.
Dr. Stephen Cooke. Boy, oh boy, we could go on for
I
days.
love talking to that guy. He's just so genuine on his answers. You know his answers are for real. And if he doesn't know, he'll tell you. Well, you know what? We're just studying that right now, and you know what I mean? So it's great information for anglers. That's
those
for sure.
of you who may not be familiar with him or just tuning in for the first time on this show, he is a professor at Carleton University, biology professor. He has published more than 700 peer-reviewed papers. That speaks volumes in itself. He's a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and secretary of the College of the Royal Society of Canada.
Jeez, you can say that again. No, you can't.
Oh my God. Anyways, we love him to death here on the show.
And he's an angler. He's an avid angler. He loves going fishing, which it really, I think, helps that whole cause, that whole study. You know what I mean? So
we've had a lot of scientific people on the program throughout the years. I don't think there's one that is as avid an angler as
you're
Stephen,
probably right.
They all dabble with it.
I mean, Gordy Pizer, but he wasn't really he wasn't a biologist like Steve, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, he'll argue that because I think he was a biologist by trade.
Was he?
I think so.
Oh, okay, maybe he was. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
anyways, that are it, folks. We appreciate you joining us once again on anything we got to do to wrap up. Dean, have we got everything covered here?
Yeah, we got everything covered.
We got everything covered.
You can mention the contest. We got a bunch going on.
We do have a bunch of going on. We have a bunch of going on all the time, and that is contests on fishingcanada.com, the gateway, the portal to your next fishing adventure.
I just heard a great one on the Eating Wild podcast, boys. They got a $2,000 Traeger smoker / barbecue.
That.
Woo! That sounds like a dandy. That's on now, Dean, or is it up to come soon?
Depending on when this episode comes out, but it's probably still on.
Keep an eye out on the Fishing Canada website.
Bought one of those.
Did you? Well, you better enter
because I could enter. I can't enter now.
Well, we can cheat a little bit.
The reason I almost bought one, I started looking into it about propane versus coal versus wood versus all that, and these pellet things were. I didn't even know they existed. And oh my God, they are the cat's ass.
They're the deal, aren't they?
They are the cat's ass. If you have a chance to win this thing, I didn't realize it was $2,000 because the ones I was looking at were like $1,000. But if you have a chance to win this thing for free, I would highly
fishingcanada.com
highly recommend that you go in, and you can go in every day. Apparently, it's every 24 hours you can put another ballot in the box,
right?
Or
and
the
then
drum.
And then the Eating Wild podcast. If you keep listening to the Eating Wild podcast, they're going to give you hints for an extra 100 entries every time you do it. So it's worth it.
And who doesn't want to listen to the Eating Wild podcast?
It's good stuff. Come on now. I just had it. I just listened to it at lunchtime. It was great.
I know.
Great.
I know.
So.
Anyways, that are it. On behalf of the entire team, we have Vova, who's nodding over there. I don't know whether he's falling asleep or agreeing with me. We have a new man in the room today, Orion. Nick, he was honoring us with half a presence. Anyways, he wasn't. There you go. And of course, our lovely producer.
That's got to be. There's something with that. Right?
I have no idea what that is.
There's something there.
Dean Taylor, everybody. He's Peter Bowman. I'm Angela Viola. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
Wind them one up.